Imagine it's late. The world outside your window is quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, broken only by the faint hum of a computer fan. The blue glow of the monitor is the only light in the room, a portal to another world. A world without borders, without rules. This is where our story begins. Not in a dark alley, but in the quiet solitude of a bedroom. It's the story of a handful of kids, barely out of school, who reached out from their keyboards and touched the digital nerve centers of some of the most powerful corporations, and even the US military. They weren't spies. They weren't terrorists. They were gamers. And for years, they played the most dangerous game of all. A global game of cat and mouse where the stakes were nothing less than their freedom. This is the story of the Xbox Underground. So get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let me tell you how a broken car bumper, an online alias, and a thirst for the ultimate cheat code led to one of the most audacious hacker sagas the world has ever seen. A saga that ended with the slam of a prison cell door. The constant, low hum of server fans was the soundtrack to David Packer's life, a digital lullaby that sang of hidden worlds and infinite possibilities. In the perpetual twilight of his bedroom, illuminated only by the cold blue light of multiple monitors, the 22-year-old computer science student was a study in focused intensity. His shoulder-length blonde hair was often tied back in a messy ponytail, and his eyes, bleary from sleepless nights, remained locked on lines of cascading code. To his professors, he was a bright but disengaged student. To the denizens of the Xbox modding underworld, he was Xenon, a digital demigod, architect of exploits whose custom firmware and physics-defying cheats for games like *Halo** and *Call of Duty* were the stuff of legend. This dual existence was a carefully maintained equilibrium, a secret life flourishing in the shadows of the mundane. But the real world, with its unyielding physicality and brutal consequences, was poised to shatter that balance, beginning with something as absurdly ordinary as a cracked piece of automotive plastic. The bumper on his family's car had succumbed to a minor fender bender, a commonplace annoyance. Yet it set in motion a chain of events that would lead to a federal indictment. The official dealer refused to ship the replacement part across the Canadian border, presenting a logistical puzzle. David's solution was to turn to his friend, Justin May, a voice from the digital ether who had materialized into a real person living in Wilmington, Delaware. The plan was simple, almost childishly so. An 8-hour road trip with his father, a quick stop at Justin's to collect the bumper, perhaps a fast food meal for the road, and a return home. It was the kind of forgettable journey that should have faded from memory within a week. As their sedan merged into the line of vehicles at the U.S. border crossing, David felt the mild, universal anxiety of international travel. He handed over his passport. The uniformed officer's gaze was routine, flicking from the photo to David's face. Then it stalled. The officer's expression shifted from bored efficiency to sharp focus. His eyes darted back to the screen, then locked onto David's. "What's Xenon?" he asked, his tone deceptively casual. The name hit David like a physical blow, a secret identity violently dragged into the harsh light of day. It was the moment the character stepped out of the movie screen. The two worlds, the fluid, rule-bending realm of cyberspace and the rigid, unforgetting reality of international law smashed together. The officer was no longer just a bureaucrat. He was an oracle who had deciphered a forbidden's prophecy. From the periphery, two figures in the dark, tactical uniforms of Homeland Security emerged, their movements economical and lethal, their hands resting on the matte black grips of their sidearms. The command to exit the vehicle was a statement of finality. The metallic click of the handcuffs, cold and constricting around his wrists, was the period at the end of his old life. David Packer was under arrest. The errand had been a carefully laid snare. The FBI, it was revealed, had been patiently weaving a web for years, and the young man known as Xenon was a prized catch. In a sprawling investigation into a hacker collective of unprecedented audacity, the Xbox Underground. This was not the work of a nation-state or a sophisticated syndicate. It was the story of a digital Lost Boys, a globe-spanning saga of adolescent brilliance and folly that began not in a war room, but in the warm glow of 1,000 bedroom monitors, fueled by caffeine, curiosity, and a profound misunderstanding of consequence. David's path to that fateful border crossing was paved with an innate, autodidactic genius for the language of silicon and electricity. As a child, while his friends were playing flash games on browsers, he was meticulously building his own from the ground up. A task he undertook not for utility, but for the pure, intellectual thrill of deconstructing and reconstructing reality. The launch of the original Xbox in 2001 was a cultural phenomenon, but for David, it was a spiritual awakening. The hulking black console was not merely a toy. It was a locked grimoire of arcane knowledge, and he was compelled to learn its spells. He found his coven in the early, anarchic online forums, a digital speakeasy where hobbyists shared incantations to jailbreak their consoles, liberating them from corporate control to run homemade software and pirated games. His aptitude was prodigious. He soon evolved from a mere user of exploits to a creator of them, writing sophisticated mods for Halo, that could alter fundamental laws of the game's universe, changing gravity, summoning cataclysmic weather, and transforming battlefields into personalized sandboxes of chaos. He wasn't just a player, he was a local god. The stakes were raised to a professional level with the 2005 debut of the Xbox 360. Microsoft had fortified its digital castle, and the only keys were the rare, heavily controlled developer kits, bespoke versions of the hardware granted only to accredited game studios. For a time, the fortress seemed unassailable. Then, a miracle of corporate oversight. A treasure trove of thousands of these dev kits was found not in a secure vault, but in a scrapyard, mistakenly discarded as electronic waste, rescued and leaked onto the gray markets of the internet. They became the ultimate status symbol. For David, acquiring one was like a knight claiming a legendary sword. He procured several, and it was through the resale of one of these sacred objects that his digital friendship with Justin May, known online as MTW, was cemented. The dev kit was his all-access pass to PartnerNet, Microsoft's velvet-roped private network where developers uploaded and tested pre-release versions of their games. David became a digital cartographer of these unfinished worlds, spending his nocturnal hours exploring glitchy, untextured landscapes, capturing screenshots of games that were still secrets, and cementing his legend on the message boards. His waking life, the lectures, the exams, the societal expectations began to feel like a tedious, poorly rendered cutscene. In his mind, this wasn't crime. It was the most demanding and rewarding internship imaginable, a direct pipeline to his future as a game developer. His legend, broadcast across the internet, attracted other young sorcerers. From the sprawling, sun-drenched suburbs of Perth, Australia, emerged Dylan Wheeler. At 14, Dylan was a conduit of raw, untamed energy, his long brown hair and restless demeanor masking a sharp intellect and a deep-seated contempt for boundaries, which had already earned him 2 suspensions for hacking his school's network. To him, David and his crew were rock stars, and he stormed onto the scene under the banner Superae, a name that reflected his boundless and often reckless ambition. Simultaneously, in Washington, New Jersey, a hardware purist named Sanad Nawah secured a dev kit. At 24, Sanad was the elder statesman, a true technophile whose bedroom resembled a mad scientist's laboratory, a beautiful chaos of soldering irons, oscilloscopes, and the skeletal remains of disemboweled electronics. He approached the Xbox not as abstract code, but as a tangible physical puzzle to be solved with wire and solder, adopting the handle Sonic. This was the nascent core of the underground. The cerebral architect David, the impulsive force of nature Dylan, the hardware engineer Sonid, and the wild card Justin. For a glorious period, their kingdom was PartnerNet, a digital El Dorado where they feasted on the future of gaming. But mastery breeds boredom. Sated on mere access, David craved power. In 2009, he uncovered a critical vulnerability in the matchmaking code of the newest asterisk, Call of Duty asterisk. He established a private shadow server, a digital speakeasy, where, for the astronomical fee of $100 per half hour, players could shed their mortal limitations and become invincible specters, phasing through solid walls and landing every shot with supernatural precision. The revenue was a torrent, a digital Klondike gold rush that at its peak funneled up to $8,000 a day into his accounts. He lived a schizophrenic existence, a seemingly ordinary student by day, a high-rolling digital kingpin by night, whisking his girlfriend away for weekends at luxury hotels, and dinners at restaurants where the menus had no prices. When the legal department at Activision finally pinpointed his operation, their cease and desist letters felt like distant, irrelevant thunder. He dismissed them with a hacker's arrogance. They were just games. It wasn't like he was infiltrating corporate fortresses to steal trade secrets or national security documents. That final irrevocable line, the one separating a terms of service violation from a federal felony, was about to be vaulted over, not by his careful planning, but by Dylan's unbridled audacity. The point of no return was a simple text file. An acquaintance sent Delane a dump of usernames and passwords, stolen from a forum operated by Epic Games. It was a minor breach, a digital petty theft. But Dylan, with a social engineer's intuition, scanned the list and found the credentials of a systems administrator. He posed a simple, devastating question. Was this person lazy with their security? Did they reuse this password? He typed it into the login field for the employee's corporate Gmail account. The inbox loaded. A jolt of pure, adrenalized electricity shot through him. He was inside the castle walls. Scrolling through emails with a thief's haste, he discovered another string of text. Admin 060606, a master key that unlocked Epic Games' entire internal privileged network. He immediately sent a direct message to David, the digital equivalent of a whispered secret in a crowded room. The discovery was a siren's call, impossible to resist. David, his own carefully constructed rules crumbling in the face of this opportunity, established a new, flimsy moral code. They could explore, but they would not pillage. No customer data, no credit card numbers. They were digital archaeologists, there only to uncover the artifacts of unreleased games. For months, they were ghosts in the machine of Epic Games, their digital footprints erased as soon as they were made, flitting from server to server in a silent, invisible ballet. Their persistence was crowned with the ultimate prize, an alpha build of Asterisk Gears of War 3 Asterisk, complete with its crown jewels, a precious commented source code. They had found the Holy Grail. They enlisted Sanid, whose technical wizardry allowed him to spoof his internet connection, making him the perfect courier for the dangerous download. He spent a jittery, caffeine-fueled night pulling down hundreds of gigabytes of data, the entire genetic blueprint of a blockbuster game. He meticulously burned the files onto a stack of 8 Blu-ray discs, their surfaces shimmering with stolen data. The package he mailed to David was disguised with the bland, innocuous label Wedding Videos, a pathetic shield against the forces they were now provoking. When David received it and loaded the build, the game was a broken embryonic thing, a landscape of missing textures, placeholder models, and crippling bugs. It was barely a shadow of the finished product, but it was asterisk, there's asterisk. He shared the spoils with the inner circle, including Justin. Then, catastrophe. Days later, the entire build was leaked to the public torrent sites. the gaming world erupted. News outlets ran headlines about the unprecedented leak. Epic Games confirmed the breach in a terse statement and publicly announced they had contacted the FBI. A cold, sharp dread, more terrifying than any in-game enemy, seized David. He frantically messaged Justin, begging for help in encrypting his hard drives with military-grade algorithms. Sanad, ever the pragmatist, immediately went to ground, disconnecting and lying low. But Dylan was intoxicated by the danger. While the FBI's cyber forensics teams swept the Epic servers with digital luminol, searching for the intruder's fingerprints, Dylan was still there, logging in daily, a poltergeist taunting the ghost hunters. His fearless arrogance was rewarded with an even greater prize. He discovered a virtual USB drive left connected to the network. That contained a plain text file with the administrative credentials for the entire global network. He now held the master keys to the entire kingdom. He didn't stop at exploration. He began a campaign of intimate, invasive surveillance, remotely deploying malware that gave him control of employees' webcams. From his cluttered bedroom in Australia, he watched the unguarded, private moments of the people whose professional lives he had invaded the yawns during long meetings, the shared jokes over coffee, the frustrated head-in-hands moments of a bad day. He was an invisible, malevolent ghost in their machine, a digital peeping Tom. When David and Sanad learned of this new, deeply personal violation, they were repulsed. But the repulsion was intricately woven with a dark, voyeuristic fascination. The power to see without being seen was a narcotic. Their resolve shattered, and they plunged back in. The dam was broken. What followed was a 2-year digital crime spree of breathtaking scope and scale. They became ethereal raiders, drifting like smoke through the firewalls of Microsoft Electronic Arts, Bungie, Blizzard, Valve, and Activision. They downloaded terabytes of data unreleased games, proprietary engine code, financial projections, and corporate roadmaps. It was a fever dream of acquisition, a hoarder's paradise where the valuables were ones and zeros. The gang's notoriety grew, attracting new acolytes drawn by the whispered legends of their unlimited access. Austin Alcala, a tall, introverted 16-year-old from Indiana who operated under the handle Amonkey, and Nathan LaRue, a soft-spoken, homeschooled 18-year-old from Maryland who dreamed of crafting games and went by the name Anime, were inducted into the ranks. With new blood came escalated ambition and a broadening of targets. Their focus shifted from the gaming industry to the very bedrock of the technology world: Intel, AMD, Google, and even Disney. They successfully breached the defenses of nearly 25 Fortune 500 companies. The zenith of their audacity and their folly arrived in the late summer of 2012. Austin and Nathan, while casually probing the network of a military contractor called Zombie Studios, discovered an unsecured, unlogged tunnel. They followed this digital rabbit hole and emerged somewhere they knew was forbiddance. A server owned and operated by the United States Department of Defense. The directories contained the asterisk, a H-64D Apache flight simulator asterisk, a multi-million-dollar classified-grade training tool used to teach pilots to fly one of the world's most advanced attack helicopters. They paused, a flicker of primal fear cutting through their digital hubris. They knew this was a threshold into a different realm of justice, one with the full weight of national security behind it. But the lure of the ultimate trophy, the addiction to the forbiddance, was a siren's call they could not resist. They initiated the download. Throughout this period, Justin NW remained the group's chaotic, unpredictable element. Years prior, he had been caught at the PAX East Gaming Convention in an act of breathtaking physical boldness, sneaking behind a developer's booth to directly connect his laptop and download a game, only to be chased down and tackled by security. During his subsequent arrest, he had inexplicably tried to bribe the officers, and had freely named other more significant hackers in a desperate attempt to seem important. The incident had planted a deep and persistent seed of distrust within the group. Was he just a reckless fool, or was he a compromised asset, an informant building a case against them? He was ostracized for a time, only to slink back into the fold with tales of his own separate criminal enterprises, return fraud schemes targeting tech giants like Cisco and Lenovo, a performance some interpreted as a desperate attempt to prove his criminal bona fides. The beginning of the end was another monumental discovery, this time deep within Microsoft's own core servers. David and Dylan stumbled upon a treasure trove: technical specification documents, CAD files for circuit boards and casing, and millions of lines of source code. It was the complete, unabridged blueprint for Microsoft's next-generation console, codenamed Durango, the future Xbox One. The find was staggering, a corporate secret worth billions. In a move that blurred the line between digital espionage and physical manufacturing, they decided to build it. They used the stolen schematics to source the exact components from online electronics distributors and had them all shipped to Nathan's quiet home in Maryland. There, with the patience and skill of a master watchmaker, Nathan assembled a fully functional, one-of-a-kind prototype from the pirated plans. They found a buyer in the murky depths of the internet and agreed on a price of $5,000. Justin, ever eager to ingratiate himself, volunteered to handle the logistics of shipping the priceless illegal device. He drove to Nathan's, collected the console, and that was the last the group ever saw of it. The package vanished. The buyer never received it. Paranoia became their new operating system. Had the FBI intercepted it? Was it lost in the mail? In a fit of impulsive, self-destructive grandiosity, Dylan, without consulting a single soul, posted high-resolution pictures of their homemade Xbox One on eBay. The auction immediately went viral, a digital sensation that saw bids skyrocket past $20,000. And Dylan, reveling in the spotlight, gave interviews to tech blogs and podcasts, boasting under his superae alias. He had not just lit a signal fire for the FBI. He had doused himself in gasoline and danced in the flames. The response from law enforcement was swift, precise, and brutal. Nathan's house was the first to be hit, the silence of his suburban street shattered by the arrival of a FBI SWAT team, who breached the door and dragged the terrified teenager from his home. Next was Sinad's turn, his sanctuary of electronics and tools violated by federal agents seizing every piece of hardware in sight. In a final, pathetic act of defiance, Dylan responded by doxing the lead FBI agents on the case, publishing their names and home addresses online, and making vague, idiotic threats about sending hitmen a move he would later deeply and publicly regret. In February 2013, the long arm of the law finally reached across the globe, and Australian federal police arrested Dylan Wheeler at his home in Perth. Core of the Xbox underground was crumbling into dust. Yet, even with the walls of their world collapsing, the addiction to the thrill held its power. A new, even more reckless contact emerged. An 18-year-old hacker named Armin, who styled himself Armin the Cyber. He approached the beleaguered David with a plan so insane it was either genius or suicidal. He claimed he could physically infiltrate the Microsoft campus in Redmond, Washington, and steal actual, finished Durango prototypes. David, his judgment eroded by pressure and a final desperate craving for the old high, agreed. Armin, armed with a cloned employee badge and a convincingly bland sweater with the Microsoft logo, walked calmly through the front gates of the corporate headquarters. His heart hammering against his ribs, he navigated the sprawling campus, located a storage room, and stuffed 3 fully assembled prototype consoles into his backpack before walking out as casually as he had entered. He mailed 2 of the stolen units to David in Austin. In a twist of fate so cruel it felt fictional, a week after his brazen theft, Microsoft's HR department, unaware of his crime, offered Armin a job. His dream had come true, only to be incinerated weeks later when a review of security footage revealed his larceny, leading to his immediate arrest and incarceration. The net was now fully and irrevocably drawn. In January 2014, a team of 4 FBI agents arrested Austin Alcala at his family home in Indiana. In March, David Packer's journey reached its inevitable conclusion, where this story began, at the U.S. border, in the cold, caged backseat of a government sedan. The subsequent trial laid bare the shocking depth of the FBI's evidence, a mountain of IRC chat logs, financial transaction records, server access logs, and most chillingly, secret audio recordings of their private hacking sessions, captured by an informant's wire. The federal indictment was a novel of their crimes, and it repeatedly cited a Person A from Wilmington, Delaware, who had provided a vast, comprehensive trove of evidence, including the self-made Xbox prototype. For every member of the group, the identity of Person A was a foregone conclusion. It was Justin. He had been the snake in their garden all along, likely cutting a deal with the feds after his own earlier legal troubles. The aftermath was a sprawling human tapestry of divergent fates and shattered lives, a stark lesson in the long-tail consequences of digital crime. David Packer, after pleading guilty and cooperating fully, served an 18-month sentence in a federal prison. He emerged chastened and wiser, completing his derailed college degree and building a legitimate, successful career in cybersecurity. His formidable talents finally harnessed for defense rather than offense. Sanad's path was far more arduous. His strict probation terms, which banned him from using any computer or internet-connected device, led to profound isolation, a crippling depression, and a subsequent turn to drugs. That resulted in a probation violation and another 9-month prison sentence. It was only after this second stint that he could finally begin the slow, painful process of rebuilding his life. Austin, the youngest of the Use-Savaced members, avoided prison entirely by cooperating with the FBI on a separate, massive investigation into FIFA coin fraud, and he eventually parlayed his notoriety and skills into a position as the head of cybersecurity for a social media startup. The greatest and most profound tragedy was reserved for Nathan LaRue. Overwhelmed with terror at the prospect of incarceration, he made a desperate bid for freedom, cutting off his court-ordered ankle monitor and paying a friend to drive him to the Canadian border. He was apprehended at the checkpoint. In a moment of absolute, soul-crushing despair, with the bridge to Canada looming behind him, he pulled a knife and inflicted critical injuries upon himself until he collapsed on the asphalt. He survived, was hospitalized, and then served a 2-year prison sentence. It was during this period of confinement that he came to understand and embrace his true identity. As a transgender woman named Holly, the cumulative weight of the legal persecution, the trauma of imprisonment, and the struggle of her transition proved an unbearable burden. A year after her release, Holly LaRue took her own life. As for Dylan, after a protracted and combative legal battle in Australia, he fled, violating the terms of his bail, and using his dual citizenship to escape to the Czech Republic. His mother was later convicted and sentenced to 18 months in prison for aiding his international flight. Dylan briefly resurfaced in the United Kingdom, founding a cybersecurity firm and giving talks on penetration testing, a bizarre attempt to legitimize his past, before shutting down the company in early 2020 and disappearing from public view entirely, a ghost in the machine once more. And Justin, the betrayer, was not spared the long arm of the law. In 2017, he was finally arrested for his own long history of fraud, fencing, tax evasion, and money laundering crimes he had committed, even while acting as an informant. In 2021, he was sentenced to nearly 8 years in federal prison and fined $4 million, a final poetic coda that proved unequivocally that in this tangled, sordid saga of digital ambition and betrayal, no one emerged unscathed or unpunished. The story of the Xbox Underground is not a classic tale of master criminals. It is a modern, digital Greek tragedy, a sprawling Shakespearean epic for the connected age. It is a cautionary tale written in code, a stark reminder of the immense, godlike power that can be wielded from a keyboard in a darkened room, and the profound, crushing powerlessness that follows when the real world, with its immutable laws, its fortified borders, and its cold, hard consequences, finally decides to push back. They were children of the internet, boys who built a magnificent, intricate castle in the sky, who flew too close to a digital sun, only to learn, in the most brutal way imaginable, that gravity, both physical and legal, is utterly, ruthlessly, and eternally unforgiving. Good night, have a sweet dreams.